Hello everyone, welcome. Today we are filming what is one of my favorite videos to make every single year. I look forward to this video all year long because I love gushing about my favorite books, and today we are going to be talking about my favorite books I read in 2023. So usually I make this video at the very end of December or even the beginning of January because I read all the way through the very end of the year, but I know that this year that's not going to be possible. I'm probably only going to finish one more book, and I know it's not going to be on my list of favorites for the year, so you're getting my list a bit early, but that's okay because I feel like it's a really solid list and they're books that I really love, some new absolute favorites, all-time favorites that I'm so happy that I got to experience this year, and I'm really excited to talk about them with you all. This year I feel like I really got back into some of my favorite genres, a lot of fantasy romance. I felt like I went back to some of my roots, reread some favorites from when I was a kid, rediscovered how much I loved them, and also explored some new genres. I read a total of 65 books, which for me is pretty average. I usually read somewhere between like 50 to 75 or so. I will also be doing one more video before the end of the year, just wrapping up every book I read in 2023, if you want to see everything that I read in total, but this is just going to be the favorites list condensed down. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about these all with you, even though I've talked about them a million times this year. We're going to talk about them one last time to wrap up 2023. Before we get into all the books, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Parade. Parade is a sustainable and inclusive underwear brand that offers everything from bras and bralettes to underwear, as well as some sleepwear. And I'm so excited to be working with them because I absolutely love their bras. I am so tired of wearing underwire bras, and I have like been switching to wearing either shirts that don't require me to wear a bra or bras that don't have underwire because it's just so much more comfortable. And Parade has so many incredible bras that are extremely comfortable and have no underwire, and I can wear them for hours on end, and it's amazing. This is one of their triangle bras that I adore. I've been wearing this nonstop. It is so cute. I'm in love with the print of it, and I'm even more in love with the fit of it. It's so comfortable, and I love the design. It doesn't create any marks or indents on your skin. It doesn't press into your skin too much. It's like just stretchy enough. The other thing I really love about this bra specifically is the thin straps. Usually straps like this I find like will dig into your shoulder and into your skin and can get irritating, but these don't do that at all. They offer so much support. So yeah, everything about this is just like everything I'm always looking for in a bra. What I really love about Parade is that they're not only size inclusive, they have sizes that go up to 5XL, but they're also completely gender inclusive and are meant to be worn by anybody. I had such a simple time picking out my sizing online, and everything fit me perfectly. They have so many different styles that are perfect for any kind of fit that you're specifically looking for. This one was just like perfect for my taste. So yeah, I highly recommend checking out Parade if you're looking to get yourself some new comfy underwear for the new year, or if you're just looking to switch to something more comfortable than what you've been wearing. They have been such a gem for me, and I will be wearing them nonstop from now on. So if you'd like to try out Parade for yourself, be sure to use my link and my code in the description box, Clockwork30, to get 30% off your entire purchase. And once again, a huge thank you to Parade for sponsoring today's video. All right, so now without any further ado, let's get into my top 10, because I believe I do have 10 here, favorite books I read in 2023. All right, so starting off, I have to mention my favorite manga that I read this year, which is the only manga I read this year, but I read a good number of volumes of this. I think it was like around 15, maybe it was 20 volumes. I don't know. I read so much of this year, and I still haven't finished it, and I need to continue. But that, of course, you all know is Yona of the Dawn. This is my favorite manga series. I love this series. It's so fun. The romance is great. The fantasy is great. The world building is incredible. The found family, just perfection. It's everything that I like in a good fun fantasy story, and I just think more people should read it. I say that every time I talk about it, but I just really believe that that's the truth. More people should read it because I think more of you would genuinely love this. Like, if you gave it a chance, I think you'd really like it. Even if you're not into manga, this could totally get you into manga. But I'm so enjoying my time making my way through this, and I will be very sad once I get to the end and then I have to wait for every new installment. That's kind of why I've been procrastinating it. So the next book on my list is one that I think will probably be on a lot of people's favorites list for this year. And I really loved this book, and I've talked about it multiple times in multiple videos on my channel, but I'm not going to mention it or show it here specifically because there is a boycott on St. Martin's Press, the publisher for this book, and to stand in solidarity with the boycott, I'm not going to be mentioning the book. I wasn't aware of the boycott until very recently, actually, and so there were a couple books that I was mentioning while the boycott was going on, but I didn't know. But yeah, to stand in solidarity with the SMP boycott, I will not be mentioning the book, and from now on I won't be mentioning books published by that publisher until they address the situation. If you want to learn more about the boycott, I will leave a link in my description box so that you can read up on it. But yes, just wanted to mention mention that here in case it feels like there's a book missing. I didn't want to just not address it. Moving along, the next favorite read of mine is one of my favorite romance reads of the year, fantasy romance, if you want to call it that, but it's more romance based than fantasy. And that is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. This book is so good. It's so good, and I need more people to read it. I am in love with this story. It is so wholesome. It's so heartwarming. The greatest found family, such a fantastic romance, wonderful, lovable characters, a perfect balance between the romance and the plot. I don't know what else there is to say about this book to convince you to read it. You need to. I promise you, if you like the types of books I like, you will love this book. It's just so good. I've talked about it many times, but if you don't know what it's about, it follows the story of this woman who is a witch. She is not really supposed to talk about the fact that she's a witch. People don't know that witches exist, so she has to keep it a secret. But she essentially gets up getting hired as a teacher for these children to teach them magic because the kids are also witches. And so she ends up moving into this house to help teach these children. And then she also finds love along the way. So magical and whimsical and just purely heartwarming. I loved this. This is comfort in a book to me, and it was fantastic in every way imaginable. Please, please read it. Next on my list is my other favorite romance read of the year, and that absolutely has to be Happy Place by Emily Henry. I've said this many times now. This is my favorite Emily Henry book. This is the one for me. This is her peak, in my opinion. I have to read Funny Story when that comes out as well, but I don't know what's going to be able to top this. I don't know if anything can. In terms of her work, I mean. This was just the perfect balance of romance and plot again, but also the perfect balance of emotional and lightheartedness. I just loved every word of this. I deeply, deeply related to a lot of the story. I know a lot of people find this one boring and confusing, like they don't really like the main character. That hurts me because I related to her so much, so sorry that you just don't get it, but I feel like my Goodreads review of this perfectly describes how I feel about it. This was written for the Archer, Champagne Problems, and Right Where You Left Me girlies, and the You're Losing Me girlies. That is who this book was written for, and it's just everything I could have wanted in a good lit fic romance. It's fantastic. It made me cry. That's all I can ever ask for. You know, sometimes you just really want something to make you cry from the overwhelming emotion of it. And this was the perfect balance of that. I love a good misleading title. Okay, the next book on my list is the only one that I don't have a physical copy of, even though I did order one this time. It just hasn't arrived in time for me to film this video. And that is, to no one's surprise, Woman Eating. You all know I love this book. Favorite lit fic book I have read. It's phenomenal. It's everything I could ever ask for. It's dark, it's kind of gothic and gruesome and violent, but it's also, I've said this before and I'll say it again, this is for the vampire girlies with mommy issues and eating disorders. That's who this book was made for, and it's, oh my god, I eat it up, pun intended. If you don't know what it's about, it follows the story of this girl in her early 20s who moves out for the first time, and she's just dealing with being out in life on her own and dealing with things on her own for the first time and being away from her mother. But she is also a vampire, so she's struggling with the difficulties of that part of her life, as well as the difficulties of being a 20-something-year-old woman. I love the layers of metaphor. There are so many quotes in this book that just really, really hit me. Such a phenomenal book. If you still haven't read it, highly recommend. It's definitely a little weird. It's definitely gruesome. You should absolutely look up the content warnings for it, but if it's the type of thing that you can handle, you can't go wrong. The next book on my list is another one I've talked about countless times as well, but it has to be on this list because this is just one of the best books I've read, and I, again, think more people need to read this book. And that is As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow. If you still don't know what this book is about, it follows the story of our main character, Salama, who is working as a doctor, essentially, even though she's not really a doctor. She's a pharmacy student during the time of the Syrian Revolution. And it's about her story as she is trying to get herself and her family out while also helping as many people as she can, working as a doctor, essentially. And it is one of the most heartbreaking books I have ever read in my entire life. It is also one of the most heartwarming books I've ever read in my entire life. This book made me so sad and so happy. Sad because it's so real and the story was written from such a place of raw and true emotion, but it's also so heartwarming because it's written from that place as well. There's so much conviction in this book and in her voice in telling this story. There's also a lightheartedness that's woven through this as well that kind of helps balance out the really difficult and heavy subject matter, because this book will make you sob your eyes out. It has one of the most intense and actually surprising plot twists I've ever read in my entire life, but it still simultaneously manages to make me smile. And I love this book so much. I need more people to read it. It's such an important story, but it's also a really beautifully written story. The romance in it is so good. There are so many Ghibli references. If you are a Ghibli fan, this is also a book for you. So yeah, can't recommend this enough. Had to be on my list of favorites for the year. All right, so next up we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. I finally decided which edition of this book I wanted. There were so many editions and I did not know which one I wanted, and I just had the ARC. And so I finally decided on this beautiful Owl Crate edition, which is so pretty. I'm so glad I got this. Look at the end papers of this. I'm obsessed. If you don't know what this book is about, it's a YA dark academia novel that follows our main character, who is a student at this academy studying architecture, but she really wants to be studying literature, but they don't let any women into the literature department. And she ends up taking on this project to help design the house for her favorite author who recently passed away. And the story is about her kind of discovering who he was as an author and the mystery behind who really wrote his stories and what his stories were really about. And it's really at its core a story about stories, but also a story about trauma and working through trauma. I love the layers that this story had in terms of the themes and subjects that it covered, as well as like the format of having like the story within the story, since we have the author's work in here as well. This edition also specifically has an exclusive chapter in the back that goes into one of the books that's in this story as well, which I really wanted. Like, I would have read that as a book itself too. And so the fact that we get like a chapter from that, it was so nice to read. I loved it. I really liked the romance in it as well, even though to me that's not like the biggest part of this story. I really enjoyed it as well, but the actual like themes and the subject matter that the story covers and explores was what I really enjoyed about this. And of course the prose in this book is just breathtaking, stunning. Absolutely love this book. Cannot recommend it enough. If you still haven't read it, you definitely should. You won't regret it. Okay, now we have entered my top 3 favorites for the year, and this was where I got kind of stumped this year because I had like a solid favorite for the year for so long. From basically January, I had my favorite book of the year. Like, it was the one. There was nothing that was going to touch it. There was nothing that was going to top it. But then in November, I read something else that ended up kind of throwing everything off a little bit, but this is still like, it's still so high up there. It's like a new all-time favorite for me, and that is absolutely The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. I've talked about it so many times in so many videos from the very beginning of this year, and I've been thinking about it since then. It has not left my mind. Did I read it in January or February? Now I can't remember. If I didn't read it in January, I read it in February, but I can't remember exactly. But very early on in the year, it was one of the very first books I read this year. This is such a dark, twisted, mysterious story that is just so gut-wrenching when you get it, when you've felt this, when you've experienced a relationship like this in your life before. It's just so real in so many ways, even though it's dramatized and played up for the sake of this story. It's a very real experience in a lot of ways, I think, too. And it just like spoke to something that I did not realize that I needed to re-examine in my life, something that I had never been able to put the words to. It's one of those books that feels like it was written for you, and it was just such a fantastic reading experience. It was mysterious and suspenseful, and the plot twists were surprising, and it's just unlike anything else I've ever read. So absolutely an all-time favorite for me now. All right, so now my number 1 and 2 spots kind of go hand in hand, but before I get into the number 1 spot, we'll talk about the second place spot, obviously. And that has to go to The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. You know what's been going on with me, okay? Nothing has consumed me the way that this has consumed me, specifically like just the Hunger Games again has consumed me this year. Nothing has reignited my true love for stories, for reading, for watching movies, for like everything, the way that reading this and rereading the Hunger Games did. And this goes hand in hand with my number 1 spot, and that's obviously the Hunger Games. I hesitated with this because I didn't feel like I could count this as a number 1 since it's a reread for me, but because it's been like, I think like almost 15 years since I've reread these books, it feels like I read a new book. Also, it's my list, it's my rules, so I can put whatever book I want at the top of the list. So I feel like it counts. I feel like that's fine because this was my favorite thing I read this year, like easily. And that was all spurred by this, and this was my second favorite. I originally gave this 4 stars when I first read it, but upon reflection, I think I'd probably give this 5 stars because it feels like such a natural part of this whole series. And I don't even know how to explain this. It's not necessarily just the content in this that feels like 5 stars to me. It's just the experience I've had with this book that feels like a 5-star experience. It's just been so nice to have my love of reading reignited in this way, and the like true passion I feel for storytelling and analyzing literature to just come back in this way. I mean, I made like an entire video essay analyzing this book and its comparison to the movie and why I think the book is so much better than the movie specifically, despite still loving the movie. I'll leave it linked if you want to go watch. I'm so proud of that video, like incredibly proud of that video. It's one of my favorite things I think I've ever made, if not my actual favorite video I've ever made. And so I'm really glad that a lot of you are also resonating with it. But yeah, it just like, I had so much to say in me and it just poured out of me, and that was all because of this book, because of what this book made me think about. And reading this is what made me reread The Hunger Games, and so because of that, this literally became my favorite book I read this year, even though it's a reread. I really think that having reread this has inspired me to actually go back and reread a lot of old books that I really liked when I was a kid, just to see how I feel about them now. And I feel like next year is actually going to be a rereading year for me. I will definitely be reading some new books, but I think I might end up rereading a lot of old work, which I think will be good because I used to reread all the time. Like, I used to reread books more than I would read new books. And I love rereading books because you get so much more out of something once you've experienced it more than once. There's so much more to be found. The first time you're exposed to something, you can't possibly retain every single piece of information that's there. You need to go back to it and re-examine it in order to get a full picture of the story. And so there's so much value in rereading books, and I haven't done it in so long. And so it was so nice to go back to this series and read it again. I also reread Ballad. I read that book twice this year, despite the fact that it's like 500 pages or something, just because I really I wanted to be in that story and I wanted to fully understand it as much as I possibly could. And so I'm literally about to start rereading these again for the second time this year. I just feel this need to delve really deeply into a few pieces of work rather than trying to read as much as I possibly can. And while I think there's nothing wrong with that at all, I mean, I do that all the time. Like, I read 60 something books this year and I've read 100 books in previous years. I love doing that as well. I think this next year I might end up focusing more on just a few books and really delving into those instead of trying to read as much as I can. That's just kind of the place I'm at right now, what I'm really feeling. And I have the Hunger Games series and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes to thank for that. Yeah, reading the Hunger Games was absolutely the best reading experience I had this year. It ruined me. It made me cry so much. I have a completely new outlook on this series. I've already mentioned this in a previous video, but I feel like I understood the book when I was younger. Like, I got what the message was. I understood what the story was trying to tell you. I just don't think that at that age I had the life experience or the vocabulary or just the knowledge in general to fully grasp everything that she's trying to address in a book like this. And I don't think that I should have. Like, I'm not blaming my 13-year-old self, but when you're an adult and you grow up and you have more experiences in life and you learn more and you have a new outlook on the world, you start to see this book in a different light as well. So I think reading it as a kid, I read a different series than the series I read this year, because those are two different people. 13-year-old me and 26-year-old me are not the same people. And we have had 13 years worth of life experience in between that time. And so this series to me now feels entirely new, entirely different, and even better than I remember it. And so yeah, absolutely has to be my favorite read of the year. I could not give it to anything else. I'm so sorry to all the new books that I read. I love you all deeply, but nothing is The Hunger Games. And yes, I will be making a full deep dive video into the Hunger Games series. I have not decided if I'm gonna do it book by book or just do like a full really long one for all 3 books. If you have a preference, let me know. But in the meantime, if you want to go see my deep dive into Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, feel free to watch, feel free to rant with me. I quite literally don't want to do anything except talk about the Hunger Games. So I don't think that's going to stop into the new year. But there you all have it. That is it for my list of my top 10 favorite books I read in 2023. Like I mentioned earlier, this was a fantastic reading year for me. I feel like I read so many books I really just deeply loved, and overall I just read really good books. I did subject myself to fewer horrible books, It wasn't as bad as last year because last year I intentionally forced myself to read some really bad books I knew I wouldn't like. And this year I did not do that as much. I think I only read a couple books I knew that I wouldn't like. So it definitely wasn't as bad in that sense, but that was my own fault last year. That was my own choice. Let me know in the comments down below, what was your favorite book that you read in 2023? And if you read any of the books that were on my list, let me know what your thoughts were on them. If you'd like to follow me on any of my social media, all of my links are in the description box as always. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Thank you for reading with me and for being with me this year. And I will see you all very soon in my next video. Bye.